Welcome, Sens Talk.
Here comes Schenn, is going to pass across. Oh, he scores! He bats it in! Tim Stützle wins it for Ottawa. Brayden is going to put the finishing touches on an Ottawa win. See you later. Go Sens, go.
Welcome to Sens Talk. My name is Brandon Plant, and I am your host tonight. I'm going to take a look at some trade targets for your Ottawa Senators as we approach the trade deadline on March 7th, just 2 weeks away. But before we get into the video and I break down my candidates, I want to say thank you to all of you for nominating us for 4 different awards at the 2025 Ottawa Faces Magazine Awards. It's unbelievable to just be nominated, but to win would be the cherry on top. And we're looking to, defend our title. We are two-time, now looking to be 3-time champion as the best YouTube channel in Ottawa. We also won last year Best Blog. We're looking to do what the Kansas City Chiefs couldn't do, win a 3-peat for Best YouTube Channel in Ottawa, and again, looking to defend our title and go back-to-back for Best Blog. So we're up for Best YouTube Channel, Best Blog, Best Sports Reporter, and Best Sports Podcast. Again, thank you to all of you for your nominations. It means the world to me. But since we're nominated, we might as well win this thing, right? So voting is open until March 15th. You can vote up to once a day for all 4 different categories on facesottawa.ca/awards. facesottawa.ca/awards. So again, thank you to all of you for nominating us. And again, if you vote for us, much appreciated. It means the world to me and the rest of the team here at Sens Talk, especially the blog guys, like the YouTube channel and stuff, obviously is me. But the blog, I don't really do much in the blog. I edit and stuff, but I don't really write many blogs. The bloggers on the team do a hell of a lot of work. So to get them some recognition as well would be beautiful. So again, thank you for considering voting for us. And if you do vote for us, I love you all. Thank you so very much. Now let's get into today's video as I take a look at about a half dozen or so potential trade candidates or targets for your Ottawa Senators as we approach the trade deadline. Now look, I'm not going to spend 2-3 hours in this video looking at every single potential target. And by that I mean, look, I'm not going to take a look at fourth-line guys the Ottawa Senators might acquire. I think the Ottawa Senators should acquire a fourth-line grinder type of guy, maybe a Patrick Maroon, maybe a Trent Frederic. These are guys that I would target for that bottom 6. But again, there's so many bottom 6 guys around the National Hockey League. Those are smaller type of deals. I will just react to it when it happens, and I think it will happen. This video, I'm going to spend primarily taking a look at players that can fill a crucial role in this Ottawa Senator roster for now and the long term. And by that, I mean a top 6 role. Just consider this for a second, okay? The Ottawa Senators had to go 11-7 the other day, and literally the line with Tim Stützle had 2 players, because there's literally no one really on this roster, injuries or not, that could fill that position there. Or, again, in that top 6, we don't really have 6 guys that can fill out that, that top 6 with efficiency, right? I mean, talking about efficiency for a second, the Ottawa Senators only have 5 players on the team right now with 15 goals or more. One of those includes Adam Gaudette, who, by the way, scored more than half of those goals in the first month or 2. So he has, he's been fine, but he's not a 15-20 goal scorer, right? So those are inflated numbers for the hockey god, who we love, by the way. And then Claude Giroux as well, who is not getting any younger, right? He's a grizzled veteran who certainly can still hang and produce in the National Hockey League, but I mean, especially in the long-term outlook of the team, you can't rely on him to put up top 6 numbers. I mean, the fact he's still doing so is impressive. So that, in my opinion, is the most pivotal and glaring hole on this Ottawa Senator roster now and for the long term. Goaltending, we got covered. Defense, we more than have covered. I mean, we have a depth crisis right now. We have so many depth guys, we don't know what to do with them. In the forward core, it's a completely different story. Only 7 players on the Ottawa Senator roster have scored double-digit goals, by the way, as well. I mean, scoring is an absolute issue for this team. And if your name is not Brayden Tkachuk or Tim Stützle, if you're not in that big 2, then you're really not producing. I mean, you have guys like Norris and Batherson, but Norris battles injuries and Batherson battles consistency. So the only 2 consistent guys are Tkachuk and Stützle, and eventually it's going to wear on them. They can't do everything, right? So you need to bring in a complementary top 6 winger to help them produce. So that's what I'm going to take a look at in today's video. Now, our cap situation is interesting. I mean, right now, we are right up at the cap, essentially over the cap. So they're going to have to do some cap gymnastics to make this work. But what I really want to focus on is next year, the cap will increase by $7.5 million from $88 million to $95.5 million. That's a massive jump. So just keep that in mind. We have Giroux, who's likely going to take a bit of a pay cut on his next contract, especially if he's with the Ottawa Senators, which I don't see why he wouldn't be. So there will be roughly, I would imagine, this is just a rough estimate, 8 to 10 million of free cap space for next year. So just keep that in mind, okay? So you can make the flexibility work for the short term, and the next year that cap hit will open up to make all of this work. Now, again, on top of that, you also could potentially put a guy on the LTIR. Don't think that will happen. Don't want that to happen, especially. But that is also a possibility as well. Vegas Golden Knights. Anyways, I also will not mention guys like Elias Pettersson, Alex Tuch, etc. in this video. I just can't see the Sens going big fish hunting like that. Considering how patient Steve Staios has been with this roster, I don't see them swinging for the fences, at least right now. Maybe in the summer, especially if we miss the playoffs, but not right now. Not right now. I think we're going to go for more of a, a nice, calm, safe acquisition that can help us for at least the next few years. So with that, let's jump into it. The first player I'm going to take a look at here is Ryan Donato, who is an interesting case because Ryan Donato is a guy who can kind of do it all, okay? I mean, this is a guy this year who has actually had a very solid year for a very bad Chicago Blackhawks team. He has played in 55 games, averaging just over 15 minutes of ice time, scoring 19 goals and 38 points. That's pretty impressive, especially, again, when you're on a team like the Chicago Blackhawks, who are not exactly top dogs offensively, right? So this is a guy that can play on your power play. He's done very well on Chicago's power play, especially this year. But this is also a guy that can play on your penalty kill. He's kind of like, I don't want to compare him to Nick Paul, but he's kind of like Nick Paul in that aspect where he's a Swiss Army knife. He can play really wherever you want in that middle six. Power play, penalty kill, top six, middle six, he can do it all. He's a very, very solid player. And most attractive about him is he's a winger and a center, primarily a center, by the way. But he can play the wing as well. He's 28 years old, so he's hitting the prime of his NHL career right now. Here's the downside. Is it a downside? I mean, if you want him for long term, it's a downside because you can't afford him long term. He's going to get paid, in my opinion, probably upwards of $4+ million on his next contract. But speaking of that contract right now, very affordable. He's a free agent at the end of the year, and right now he commands a cap hit of $2 million. So this is probably the player out of the rest of the players I'm going to talk about in this video that is probably the easiest to fit into our cap situation. Chicago can retain some salary and make this work rather easily. We can even send a body back, and it's basically a wash. So Donato is a player that would be easily acquirable. And as well, speaking about acquiring him, it would only cost like a second-round pick, apparently, between a second and a third-round pick. So very affordable as well, especially compared to other guys on the market. So, again, you have to understand that with the cap situation we're in, a guy like this is a guy that you really got to pay attention to and a guy that you really have to consider. Because, look, you're not going to get a guy producing essentially 40 points so far this year making $2 million. You're just not going to do it, especially for roughly a second-round pick or so. The Ottawa Senators are right in the thick of the playoff race, and I'm more than fine giving up a second-round pick for a guy that's putting up, basically 20 goals so far already this year and roughly 40 points and can really do it all on a cap-friendly style. So again, if you expect him to sign long-term, I don't know about that, but for the short term anyways, he would be a very good fit. And I do want to say he is far exceeding, his career highs in points already. So is this a fluke? It could be, but also he's playing in an elevated role. He's never played this amount of time on average. He hasn't played, with the skill level of teammates he's playing with right now, like Connor Bedard, for example, right, or a Taylor Hall at the time before he was dealt. So again, he was playing primarily like bottom 6 minutes for the majority of his NHL career. So maybe you can say, yeah, this could be a fluke. But also maybe you can say, well, he's finally been given an opportunity to play in a top 6 role, and look what's happening. So I'm in the side of, look, he's hitting the prime of his NHL career, and I don't know if he can keep up these numbers for the rest of his NHL career, but I certainly believe he can keep it up for the rest of this season. So this is a guy I definitely would target. He's an energy guy as well. He would be 4th on the Sens in hits with 92 this year so far. And again, he can play throughout your lineup on the power play, on the penalty kill. And he's played with guys like Bedard, as I already said, so he can keep up with star players and produce. So, again, it sucks that he probably wouldn't stick around long term, but Ryan Donato is the type of guy that I'd be very, very interested in. Again, especially just because he's affordable and can produce at the rate we're looking for in that top 6. Now, the next player I'm going to take a look at is an interesting one here because Brock Boeser is a player that is a star in my opinion. The big issue with Brock Boeser is he just can't stay healthy. And I think that's probably why Vancouver's looking to trade him. Is he's probably going to want a nice payday on his next contract for one, and that injury history certainly doesn't help. So they have not been able to make a contract extension happen. He's on basically the last year of his deal, of course. He's a free agent at the end of this year. He's making $6.65 million AAV, so that's his cap hit. So again, there will have to be some cap gymnastics to make this work. This year in 50 games, again, he had a concussion this year, so he did miss some times. But in 50 games, he's played just under 18 minutes of ice time, scoring 18 goals and 35 points, including 14 points on the power play. So again, just keep that in mind that nearly half of his points this year did come on the power play. But I wouldn't attribute that much, to him just being a power play kind of guy. He is a 27-year-old right winger, okay? So he's hitting the prime of his NHL career, which is just like Ryan Donato, why I brought him into this conversation. I mean, if Donato would sign for $4 to $5 million, I could see him staying with Ottawa potentially, but I don't know if I would do that. I mean, frankly, I just don't know if I would do that. He doesn't have the track record. Boeser does. The injury history concerns me, but the track record is there to show that he's a proven 20-plus goal scorer that absolutely can play top 6 minutes. This year, as I already said, he's a 35-point guy, so he can produce. But again, it's just about whether he's healthy or not, right? But when he's healthy, he would arguably be one of the best wingers on this team. I mean, I'm thinking right now, I think you could probably say he's better, or at least at the level of a Drake Batherson, or in that conversation anyways of talent. So you're adding another Drake Batherson to this team, basically. That's pretty good, right? Because we consider Drake Batherson, or at least I do, as the team's best winger outside of Brady Tkachuk. So again, in his NHL career, I mean, he's done it all. 419 points in 529 games, 197 goals. I mean, this is a pure goal scorer. No ifs or buts about it. This guy could put the puck in the back of the net, and you can see it in his advanced analytics. You can tell that Brock Boeser can score from a variety of ways. He's famous for his electric shot, which he does have. I mean, my goodness, this guy can shoot the puck. But he also has a very good presence out front of the net. And that, in my opinion, especially on the power play, has been something the Ottawa Senators have desperately been missing. Guys out front of the net creating chaos and screens in front of the goaltender. This year, he has 11 goals off tips, and he's in the 97th percentile for high-danger shots and the 96th percentile for high-danger goals. So this is a guy that is a pure goal scorer. He can score no matter how you want him to do it. He can do it. It's just about whether or not he's healthy. So that's the risk you're taking with a Brock Boeser. And again, I think I would extend Brock Boeser because unlike Ryan Donato, he has that proven track record as a consistent point guy. And, again, Tim Stützle has really never had that next to him. A true scorer that's consistently played alongside him. Brock Boeser could be the perfect answer to that problem. So again, I mean, I'm not an NHL GM. I'm not going to throw out numbers out there. But again, you have to remember he's on the final year of his contract. If he wants more than 6.5 on his next deal, well, then I don't think he signs with the Ottawa Senators, of course. But with the cap going up, you never know. They could make it work. I could see it happening, especially if they move a body out to make it happen. So a guy like Brock Boeser is a bit of a swing. I'm not going to lie. It's not a safe pick like a Ryan Donato or the next guy I'm going to talk about, Oliver Bjorkstrand, because those guys are more affordable. Brock Boeser is a guy that's definitely going to want to get paid and get a little more money than those guys. But again, what I will say is he's a guy that consistently can produce and has done so throughout his NHL career. He's a very, very strong two-way player as well. I mean, he's not known for his defensive game, but he's not going to hurt you on the defensive side as well. He has a nice physical side to his game as well. And most of all, again, he can score from anywhere. So a guy like Brock Boeser, somebody that I'd be very, very interested in. The only concerns for me are what would he want to command if you're looking at this from a long-term perspective? What would he want to command on the next contract? So you have to take a look at that. I would hope that Steve Staios, when calling Vancouver, would at least be able to negotiate a potential contract on the phone or see where he's at on the phone before pulling the trigger on a deal. So you have to deal with that. And then as well, of course, the injury history. That's certainly something to keep in mind as well. But injuries are part of the game, and I don't think that should be a reason to not look at a player. So with that, let me know what you think about Brock Boeser. I think that is probably one of the players that might stick out a bit out of the group I'm going to mention in this video, purely because he's seen more as he's a star, right? He's a star player. So that's definitely a bit of a swing. Now, the next player I'm going to talk about is Oliver Bjorkstrand. I love Bjorkstrand. I've loved him since he was in Columbus, and I think he's a fantastic player. The 29-year-old right winger is, frankly, one of the more underrated players in the National Hockey League, in my opinion. This year with Seattle, in 58 games, has put up 15 goals and 35 points in 15.29 on average of ice time. But he's a guy that can kind of do it all. He's a nice little blend, a very solid, consistent player that could be a complementary finisher next to Tim Stützle. He has 1 year left at a $5.4 million rate. He probably will make close to $6 million, maybe 6.5 on his next deal. That is something I would absolutely do for a guy like Oliver Bjorkstrand. He's only been consistent in his NHL career. He has 373 points in 608 games, so a very consistent guy who can put up points. He's at the very least a 40 to 50 point guy, especially in a top 6 role. He would get close to 50 points. As you've already seen in his NHL career, he can do that easily, or at least in that range. So mix that in with his sneaky good release. He's a pretty good shooter, but he's a very good skater as well. I mean, he's a very, very strong skater. So he's a very good offensive guy, but defensively too, I mean, he's a very strong defensive player, a very good forechecker. And that's what really makes me love Oliver Bjorkstrand. Because imagine him poking the puck off of the opponent and then sending Tim Stützle off to to the races, right? Because Tim Stützle is like a rocket ship, right? He gets shot out of a cannon, scores a goal. I can see that happening. And Bjorkstrand, again, look, is he a goal scorer or is he a point guy? He's both. That's what I love about him. He can really do it all. He's a very consistent and even player. He's not all the way here or all the way there. He's very, very, very well-rounded. He'll get you 40 to 50 points. He's going to be very strong defensively. He's all around a player that, in my opinion, if Seattle's willing to give up, I take him with open arms here in Ottawa, and I invest in him for the long term as a core piece. Because again, is he a Tkachuk or a Stützle? No. But teams need guys like Oliver Bjorkstrand to complement the guys like Tkachuk and Stützle. And just keep this in mind. Again, I talked about it briefly there about, his strong forechecking abilities, and he's a great forechecker. Just take a look at this. In his NHL career, he has 336 takeaways compared to 230 giveaways. Just keep in mind, a lot of forwards, especially wingers, have more giveaways than takeaways usually. This guy has 100 plus more takeaways than giveaways. So he's such a strong defender. Probably, in my opinion, the strongest defensive player in this entire video. And frankly, again, this is what I mean when I say he's probably one of the more underrated players in the National Hockey League, because he's so strong defensively, so sneaky good at, stealing the puck off of the opponent and creating offensive chances from defensive plays. But more so, he's a guy that could put the puck in the back of the net in his own right. You look at his Corsi for percentage, it's above 50% as well. So more often than not, he's controlling possession while on the ice. So I'm just imagining it now again, where he strips the puck off the opponent, and whether it's along the boards or through the middle, he finds Tim Stützle with a great pass, which we know he can do, and Stützle just scores a beautiful goal. I can see it, and frankly, you could probably tell this is a player that I am very excited about talking about. And this is probably the player that I would love Ottawa to acquire the most. Again, am I crazy for saying that? Maybe. But 373 points in 608 games is very, very solid. He's a very consistent player. And again, you do need to extend him to an extension on a contract. But I think he's a player very, very worth it, especially with the cap going up. I mean, a ridiculous amount. If you can sign him to, again, a bit of a increase at 5.4 to around 6 to 6.5. With that cap hit going up, you will have to make it work, of course. But with that cap hit going up, it's going to be basically a Drake Batherson contract 2.0 in not even a couple of years from now. So again, this all depends on whether Seattle would want to trade him, and as well whether or not he would want to come to Ottawa, as he does have a modified no trade clause. So that's just something to keep in mind for Oliver Bjorkstrand. But again, it's more of a long-term play where I think he can help us in the short term. But long-term, I mean, he can grow with this team. And as well, he's at the age now where he's hitting the prime of his NHL career. He's 29. He's basically in the prime right now. And he's only going to get better here for the next few years. So a 3 to 5 year contract, I would absolutely love. Now, a player that a lot of you mentioned to me when I asked you guys about who would you acquire at the deadline if you were Steve Staios is Rickard Rackell. Now, Rickard Rackell is a very interesting one here. He's a player that, unlike the other ones that have been mentioned in this video, he's the one with a lot of term left on his contract and probably will cost the most out of this group of players as well. This year with Pittsburgh, he's playing 58 games, playing just under 20 minutes of ice time on average, with 25 goals and 49 points. Also 94 hits. He would be like top 3, top 4 on the Ottawa Senators in hits as well. So a physical player who could put the puck in the back of the net like it's nothing. So a pure goal scorer and will get you 20 goals minimum is what you're getting with Rickard Rackell. He has 3 years left with an AAV of $5 million. So a very affordable contract as well. Basically like all of your Bjorkstrand, right? In that similar range where he could do all the things you want. I think Bjorkstrand's more of a well-rounded player in terms of his defensive game. But Rackell's by no means not a bad defensive player. He's not known as a defensive guy, but he can hang with the best. He's been playing with Sidney Crosby on the first line for Pittsburgh. He should be able to fit in nicely with a guy like Tim Stützle, who's a fellow star playmaker like Sidney Crosby, especially because, again, Rickard Rackell is a fantastic skater. So, again, not a defensive player by any means, but he's fun on both ends. And with that skating ability, he could do a pretty decent job at, keeping that possession going and carrying the puck up the ice if Stützle is not doing so. And most importantly, he's on a very team-friendly cap hit. So it would cost a lot. I mean, this makes it a bit unlikely, in my opinion, because of how much this would likely cost Ottawa to give up for a guy like Rickard Rackell. Pittsburgh, they don't look to be making the playoffs this year. They're not going to trade the guy next to Sidney Crosby for peanuts. So you're probably looking at a first-round pick plus. So I don't know if Ottawa does that necessarily, especially with potentially us losing a first-round pick very soon because of Vegas and Pure Dorion. But anyways, besides all that, the point very simply is I think the ask might be a bit too high, but he's certainly a player to take a look at and poke your nose around because, again, that cap hit's there and the goal-scoring ability is certainly there as well. And with a guy like Tim Stützle, I mean, you're looking at a 30-plus guy for sure. Now, the next player I want to take a look at is more of a rental as well here because, again, I'm not backtracking from the fact that the Ottawa Senators' biggest need right now, absolutely by far, is a top 6 winger. But I think unless, again, if it's a Bjorkstrand or a Rackell, maybe a Donato, Boeser maybe, you're not going to really get that at the deadline this year. So I think Ottawa's going to probably take a look at wingers who can produce in the top 6 but aren't, locked in here long term. But I just wanted to mention Bjorkstrand and Rackell, for example, because, again, I do think Ottawa might take a look at those longer-term plays as well. But a shorter-term play would be Gustav Nyquist, who's 35 years old. He is a right winger this year. It's been a pretty down year for him in Nashville. 56 games, 9 goals, 20 points. That's a far cry from last year's 75 points with Nashville, so he's dropped off considerably. He makes $3.2 million on his last year of his NHL contract this year, so he's a much more affordable player compared to some of the other names previously mentioned in this video. So he'd be a pure rental player. He's an established veteran with a ton of experience, and he can definitely jump into this roster like that and produce, purely because this is a guy that's jumped around the National Hockey League a lot. He knows how to adapt in different systems on different rosters, so I don't think the transition would be too difficult for him. And this is a guy with a lot of experience. He's known to be a very good playmaker. He's got a good shot, too. He's a very good offensive guy in the prime of his NHL career, especially. But he's still a very good playmaker, so I can see him, being able to produce with Tim Stützle and, create plays with one another. But I do want to keep in mind that, as I already said before, he had 75 points last year. 25 of those points last year, so a good chunk of those. Third came off of the power play. So this is a guy that does rely a lot on power play points, similar to David Perron and what he did last year in Detroit, for example. So just keep that in mind, where there could be a drop-off on 5-on-5 producing. However, his 5-on-5 expected goals for percentage is pretty decent at just under 53%. So this is a guy that can also create, offense, of course, with that, and then his possession numbers are good as well at just under 54% for Corsi for percentage. So he is a bit older, but he's still a very strong skater, and the puck is not dying on his stick by any means necessary. And clearly, 75 points last year, whether it was on the power play or not, he clearly has some juice still left in the tank because he can still produce at that rate at his current status of his NHL career. his defensive game will lack compared to a Rickard Rackell or, an Oliver Bjorkstrand, in my opinion. But, he will still be able to keep up, and he wouldn't be a defensive black hole or anything like that. So I'm not really sold on Gustav Nyquist, but he's a player that's been in the news for some time in trade rumors. And I think with that, Ottawa right now just needs to really take a look at two options. You're either going to do the long-term route or you're going to do a short-term stopgap route. But you got to do one of the two. So I wanted to do both of those in this video. Now at that, a couple more players I'll just briefly mention here. Because Ottawa's been connected to them for quite some time. And, I'll just say the reason I didn't do like a whole breakdown on these two players is for Brayden Tanev, for example, I just don't think he's a top 6 guy. He really isn't. He's more of a middle 6, bottom 6 type of guy. This year, 57 games played, averaging under 14 or just roughly 14 minutes on the ice per game with 17 points, 9 of which were goals, but 116 hits. So he'd be like the second best with the Ottawa Senators in hits. He has 88 blocks as well. So a grinder type of player, right? Like if you want more of a premier type of grinder compared to a Patty Maroon or a Trent Frederick, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Brayden Tanev is definitely your guy in that aspect. But he's by no means an offensive guy you would put with Tim Stützle. And then the other player I wanted to mention briefly is Brayden Schenn from the St. Louis Blues. He's the captain. He's not going to come here for cheap. You're probably looking at a multiple asset type of deal for Brayden Schenn, who is past 30 years old, has a big cap hit at just above $6.5 million for a few more years, and he's definitely a point producer. I mean, 58 games, 33 points. He can produce, no doubt. He can play on the wing. He can play down the middle, and he brings definitely more experience to this team, but I just think the age, the cap hit, and the cost is just not worth it. So that's why I didn't include him really in this video either. But the Ottawa Senators did sniff around him last year, so you never know. Tanev and Schenn are the two guys that the Senators directly have been linked to. The rest of the guys I'm just throwing out there. So with that, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Who do you like from the players I mentioned? Who do you think I missed? And let me know everything in between as well. Now with that, I'll see you all on Wednesday after Ottawa takes on the Winnipeg Jets, looking to snap a 4-game losing streak. With that, thank you all for watching. I'll see you all soon. Go Sens, go.